death is a second away. People die every 5 minutes from a fentanyl overdose in America. There's 200 a day. It's a plane crash every day that's happening, and we're not doing anything about it, right? And so that's why we're here. The old way is out. The game's changed, the drugs changed, intervention has changed, and treatment's got to change.
This episode of Die Sober discusses sensitive topics that may be triggering to some viewers. If you are experiencing an emergency and need help, please call 911 or contact the National Suicide Hotline at 988.
For non-emergency assistance, please use us as a resource. Visit us at thefirmaddictionconsulting.com, or for more information, call us 615-210-6703. Welcome back, everybody, to the Die Sober podcast. Today, Zach and I are joined by my dear friend and colleague, Miss Lizzie Harrigan.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So some things I know we want to talk about. We're going to talk about dopamine.
Yes.
That's an area of your expertise.
I like it.
You like it?
I like dopamine. Yes.
Me too, man.
I know.
It's probably my favorite.
It's pretty good. I also like norepinephrine. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think you can explain it a little bit better than we've been able to articulate. So
Yeah.
item number one, and I want to talk about your work in the helping professions over the last, 18 years?
Yep.
So I want to be able to let everybody know how you've reached your level of expertise.
Sure.
And all the work that you've put in to get there.
Yeah.
And I do want to talk about another thing that we've gone back and forth with is you are, that I know of, the greatest borderline personality disorder wrangler, whisperer that I know of.
Yeah,
and,
thank you.
And let's also talk about how you arrived experience-wise over time, how you got there.
With personality disorders, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in your mind, dopamine in drug addicts' brains, what's the simplest way to explain it for everybody sitting at home? Big breath.
I need to start with everyone's brains because we don't all start out at the same level of dopamine, right? So like myself, I have ADHD, so I'm already dopamine deficient, right? That's part of our issue. So I think on the last episode that brought me here, where I was texting you guys, like dopamine chat, you talked about starting out at a base of like 100. And for some of us, we're not starting at 100, right? Okay. Our little machinery is like not manufacturing dopamine at the same rate, same speed, which is why people with ADHD sometimes, most of the time, have trouble executing like very common tasks, right? Like taking the trash out. You need dopamine to do that. It's involved in motivation, right? So when people say, why can't you just do that? And we say, I just can't, it's because we literally can't, right?
But like for context sake, right? Like you talk about like the space level of like, let's say like 100,
sure.
Right? In relation to that, just going with like the ADHD example, like how far off would it be from like that base? I know that's like a wide variance, but like...
And that's a question for a neuroscientist, which I am not, right? But I think, it depends on the person as well, right? So like I was not medicated in my youth. Like I'm female. It shows up differently in males and females, and like socialization has to do with that. But some people have more severe disorders, right? Trauma can do that. All kinds of things are like constantly messing with our chemistry in our brain.
Okay.
So that's what initiated the original text, right? I'm like, don't forget about us ADHD people. Like we're starting out behind the ball, right? And that's why it's there's like common issues with substance abuse with executive function disorders, because when we use something for the first time, we feel normal because we're getting to 100. And if we stick with this metaphor, right?
Yeah.
And then the more you use, right? So you're going to deplete those neurotransmitters, right? There are these factories that are kind of like pumping out the neurotransmitters. There's machinery that's like the reuptake machinery, the blocking. But when you're messing with that synthetically with drugs and alcohol or behaviors, then you're depleting it, right? So that's why withdrawal and staying sober can be really hard. Like I personally was a meth addict, so I was on the 0 scale of dopamine for like a long time in the beginning, right?
Let me go one step back.
Yeah.
you said, you mentioned drugs and alcohol, right? We know that those can mess with a person's dopamine levels.
Yep.
Right. But you also said behaviors.
Yeah.
Can you throw some of those out from your clinical lens?
Yeah. My phone is off right now, but if it were to ping, it's like 5 hits of dopamine, right? For all of us. Food, scrolling is a big one. Sex, anything really.
Attention.
Yes. Yeah. For some people, but for some people, attention feels like stress and pressure. So that's like a negative reaction, right? So solitary, like isolation. No, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a healthy way of being alone or in solitude. Solitude would provide some dopamine, right? After a work day, you go home, you're by yourself. There's some relaxation that happens. Yeah. Gambling. Oh, that's huge.
We see that one a lot.
Yeah.
We see that one a lot as co-occurring.
Right.
So with in addiction, right? Let's take a composite person of young 20s.
Okay.
They've been using drugs and alcohol from the recreation arc all the way into substance use disorder, right?
Do not pass go.
Do not pass go. This is not a healthy coping skill for you anymore. Right. This person is, average in every other way. No direct, highlight traumas in their life other than now life isn't working well. Right. Which is, by the way, it's very rare. Right, to just get to that point. Well, let's just
you
for
exist in a
simplicity's
vacuum, and then addiction is dropped in there. Sure.
Right.
Yeah, that's the alcoholic I wished I was at the time.
That's what we all thought we were too. Yeah.
Right. So this person has arrived at, okay, substances no longer serve me.
Right.
Right. Can you walk us through from an unneuroscientist view, what is happening in that person's brain that cues their behaviors and cues their actions?
In the addiction cycle, shame, right? And the imbalance of the neurotransmitters, right? So you said mid-20s. So I'm trying to think of a vignette for myself. Okay, so this person wakes up hungover, right? So we're at a deficiency. The brain chemistry is already bad, right? I don't feel good. I'm stressed. I'm tired. They're gonna seek the homeostasis they want, right? They're gonna seek to get back to balance, back to good through the familiar behaviors they've engaged in the past, using, or if it's gaming behaviors or gambling or whatever, because that's the quickest, that's the easiest, right? It takes a lot of stress to build a new behavior on the brain. The brain doesn't like to do that. So then they feel better, right? But this up and down of our neurotransmitters is too rapid. And there's no other alternatives to engage in. A healthy person is going to wake up, whoever that person is, wherever they are.
A normal person.
Yeah, the normal person is going to wake up hungover and ride it out. And that's going to encourage them to change their drinking habit, right? They'll take some time off. They'll be like, that sucks. I don't want to do that again, right? Maybe I should cool it. I'm going to ride this out. I'm not going to continue engaging in seeking that pleasure, right? I can tolerate this.
Right.
But the addicted brain is just a well-oiled machine. It's a relief-seeking missile.
A relief-seeking missile.
Yeah.
That's a perfect way to put that.
I love that. And part of that missile is driven by the word shame. And you mentioned that.
Yes.
And I think a lot of times when we start talking about substance use disorder as a disease, and I'm fully bought in on the disease model.
Right.
But you can't touch shame. It doesn't come in a box. You can't just wrap it up and then hand it to someone or take it away. Shame is in the eye of the beholder.
It's a complicated motherfucker. Can I say that?
Yeah. We say motherfucker.
It's a complicated motherfucker. Yeah. Yeah. But again, that normal person who wakes up hungover and has to go to work hungover, they are feeling a healthy amount of shame. Like shame and guilt are inborn inside of us, right? Like we come here as babies with access to that emotion because it helps us exist in a collective society, right? Without shame, I'm going to walk around naked and do weird stuff because I don't care, right? So the healthy person is going to feel that appropriate amount, which is going to change their behavior about drinking or using. Like they have some resilience towards the shame, and it's not a toxic shame. The addict is not. The addict is like drowning in that shame and guilt, and that is then perpetuating that missile, right? Like I need to get out of this. The shame is taking me down. The guilt is taking me down. In addition to how tired and horrible I feel.
Right, but I need to get out of this, meaning I need to not feel this.
Yes.
Not I want to change my behavior and move on. Right.
Missile launch. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for the composite substance use disorder, I'll speak I'll speak as it's me. I get high. I get drunk. I do what I do. I seek attention. I go out or I use alone. All of them the same. I'm good either way, as long as I'm allowed to continue.
Right.
Right. And at some point I rest and then I wake up and the fear and the anxiety and the shame is like an elephant on my chest.
Yes.
Right. And so what do? I have no tools or rewind button to go back. And so the missile of doom cranks up again and I go after it again.
And it's the only tool that you have.
Right. Because I just can't feel the shame, the guilt, the embarrassment, the fear. So I relaunch day over day over day. Consequences begin to rack up at some point. They do for everybody, whether they're financial or physical or legal, relationship dynamics. They're going to catch up to me at some point. And I have no other tools but to continue to launch.
Right.
I love this missile. Continue to launch the missile.
Right.
That's it. That's all we got.
Yeah.
And so my life continues to get worse. My disease continues to grow. And here I sit. Like how, and I think this is a great question for you with your therapeutic background, right? How do you help people with substance use start to build the motivation to do different?
Little by slow in my setting, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm in an outpatient therapy practice. But it's also dependent on what they're using and how they're using, right? Because you have to be alive to get better. So it depends on how far down.
Kind of the first prerequisite.
Yeah. You know? And that's really changed a lot with fentanyl. It didn't, the answer to this question would be radically different like 10 years ago. So it depends on what they're using, how they're using, like safety-wise, where are you at? But if they're in a relatively safe place, I'm going to start trying to introduce small behavior changes, right? And I'm going to focus on connection, and community big time. That's huge, right? I'm a believer in the disease model as well, but also that connection is the antidote to addiction.
Agreed.
I'm a relationally focused therapist, so I'm going to look at the people in their life and try to help them gain some community.
Absolutely agree. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm in complete agreement with you that I think addiction thrives in isolation.
Totally.
But when you go back to, talking about, instilling some of the new behaviors side of things and starting small and slowly, I remember, in the very beginning, you talked about how stressful that can be on the body and the brain and everything else for the individual. So when you personally, and I know it's going to be a little individualized, but generally speaking, where would a good starting point clinically for you be when you work with somebody on putting into practice these new behaviors?
I mean, in outpatient therapy, it's really just coming to appointment. It's so simple. It's coming to appointments and opening up and that honesty. And because I have to build the relationship first, right? I need to establish that this room, in my office is a safe place. I'm a safe person. I'm not going to run out and put you in the van, which is your guys' job, right? Like I'm not an interventionist in that role, although I am, right?
Get in the truck.
Yeah, get in the van. So I'm not going to do those. I'm really going to try to help this person's nervous system establish, hey, you can keep coming here. You can keep opening up to me. You can keep showing me this shame incrementally because I trust them to disclose it at what they can tolerate. And after that, right, I'm going to start introducing ideas slowly. It depends on the person. So maybe it's as small as take one day off. Take one day off. Lower your frequency. Lower your amount. Change your route of administration. Introduce a healthy relationship. One relationship. Do you have a friend that's, hasn't spoken to you in a while because of your addiction? Like reach out to them, right? Like I'm talking about tiny microscopic stuff. And as an interventionist, that's probably the biggest challenge because I also, inside I'm like, let's go,
We can do this today.
Let's go, yeah. There's all these different modes and like places of entry where we can work with people in addiction, but they all have, their own, I guess, speed, really. And the outpatient speed is extremely slow, which is challenging for me because I like to go fast. But that's what works there because it's the relationship. That's my primary tool in that space is my relationship with that person. Mm-hmm. The only time that I will sacrifice the relationship is a hardcore safety issue. Right.
You mentioned fentanyl. We talk a lot about fentanyl because it's real.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And it's in almost everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not the unicorn. Some people want to think that it is.
I know it's everywhere.
But someone shows up, and I don't want to downplay if someone's just drinking or just smoking every day, or just using their prescriptions a little bit out of line. Like I don't want to minimize those people.
Right.
But there is a definite difference in urgency in how we deliver.
Yes.
From in your world and in ours, given the substance, given the route of administration, given the person's individual recovery capital, like who do they have around them? Do they have relationships they can trust? Are they in a safe physical place to sleep and live and eat? Right. Are they able to eat and sleep? Do they have a toxic relationship that is a threat to their not only ability to get better, but even to their physical health?
Yeah.
Right. Because we see a lot of toxic relationships.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, how giving the starting points. If you had two clients, one is an alcoholic that's keeping it under control, and you've got another woman who's her direct twin, except that she's a daily fentanyl user.
Right.
Like we have two different routes to take.
Right.
They have the same support system. They're twins. They come from the same family. What would we do different? And I think the answer is everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are different animals completely. Narcan is first, right? I have Narcan all over my office, in my car, and I'm going to give it to the twin that's using fentanyl, and I'm going to, that's first, right? And my boundaries as a therapist will be different, right? Which I want to stress to other therapists listening, we get to have our boundaries as well, and they're personal in the way that we practice. And with someone who is using in a way that they're exposed to fentanyl, which is almost everyone, right? I'm not going to work with you as long as someone that's not, right? Eventually the gauntlet's going to come down and it's going to be time to take some steps, right? And I'll lay that out in the beginning. Obviously, when people come in with SUD, I want to, how do you feel about going to treatment? Let's, but if they're not ready to do that, then I'll say, I'm willing to try this for this long under these conditions. And if we're not meeting, ABC treatment markers by this date, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go to PHP. You're going to go to IOP. You're going to go to inpatient. You're going to sign up for monitoring. I'm going to introduce an interventionist. I lay it all out and get their buy-in because, again, I have to be in a different role in the therapy office, right? I'm the good cop. until I have to be the bad cop.
I think you can be the bad cop. I know you too well to believe otherwise.
I can be the bad cop, but in the therapy room, I have to be the good cop.
Right.
Yeah.
How often in your work, how often do you see people struggling with SUD that also have a toxic relationship?
Every time? What do you mean?
But why? Tell me why, Lizzie.
I don't know why. Because we're relational creatures, right? I mean, and I think addiction, well, let me go on a tangent here, okay?
Please.
All right. And I'm going to get all the facts, the little details wrong because I'm a meat and potatoes girl. But way back in the day, Sigmund Freud really fucked us up, in my opinion. Sorry. He had a client, a woman, and she was, from what it sounds like, severely traumatized. There might have been some psychosis going on. And so he's trying to figure out, this is pre-psychotherapy, right? He's trying to figure out what's going on. He's developing theories about her. She discloses to him that she's a survivor of incest by her father. Okay. And so he stands up to present his findings, his theories to his colleagues, who were all men in Europe at the time. And when he discloses this woman's story, a lot of the audience stands up and rejects it, right? Which is like a classic projection, because the idea that an upstanding man could do this, it was too far for them to wrap their heads around, okay? And so they're just rejecting it. Basically they're triggered, right? They're like, no. And instead of doubling down on what he originally thought, he went back to the drawing board, and then instead he took the pathology, which originally was in a relationship, right? There was this injury that happened in a relationship between father and daughter. And he took that pathology and he placed it inside the patient, the woman. And this is where some of the theories come from, right? Like Oedipus complex, and that instead she had fantasies about her father. And that's what made her sick, right?
I gotcha.
Right. So originally we looked at dysfunction and pathology as something isolated inside the individual. There's something wrong inside of you. It's not your environment. It's inside here. It's isolated. And we see that in addiction, right? Mm-hmm. Historically, it was a moral failing. It was a personality, a characterological flaw. It's inside this person, something isolated in them. But thankfully now psychotherapy and addiction treatment have evolved to understand that we're all interconnected. It does not work like that. We are relational, we're connected, the way that we're raised, everything is connected. So if someone is experiencing an addiction, everyone around them is participating in that, whether they know it or not. Everyone around them is influencing that, whether they know that or not. So the idea that you'd have a really severe addiction with no toxic relationships would be an anomaly.
Right. You'd have to operate in a vacuum.
Right.
You have to live by yourself.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting in our work, we're not therapists. We don't claim to be therapists. Right. Mm-hmm. But we frequently see family of origin relationship patterns play out, especially with younger adults. You can just ask for a brief family history and go, oh, yeah, I see that. So how often in your work do you have to refer back and get collateral on family of origin to really frame up what's going on with your patient?
I try to every time. It's part of the intake process. I want to know the family story. Mm-hmm. And especially with SUD clients, I often assign a genogram exercise where it's they're mapping out their family tree. But then in addition, I ask them to make their own key or legend where they're telling the story of their family. So who might have been an alcoholic, who might have been an addict, who might have been depressed. Also in the environment, who was raised during a war, who served in a combat zone, what was the economy like, right? What was going on during these times, and you can literally see the pain and the shame and the isms just like travel through the tree. And you can see the responses.
Yeah.
Like, why is this person a gambler? If you go back a few generations, you see the Great Depression and all the scarcity, and you see the adaptation and the rebellion of the family members, the descendants of that person, right? And it helps the client understand this is not isolated. It helps with the shame, right? This is not just me. Like, this is all over the place. I'm just the canary in the coal mine this time, right?
How often do you see, when you start asking those assessment questions and you refer back, how often, it's very often in our work, but there's always in our world, there's always something that, either I truly forgot or didn't realize until, I didn't realize it until you just asked me. But in the answer to the question, like, do any of your family members have mental health or mental illness history? And, I'm like, no.
Right.
Yeah.
But then when I'm confronted with drop down menu questions, I go, oh, wait.
Yeah.
Yes, there's bipolar in my family.
Yeah.
Yes, there's depression in my family.
Right.
I forgot my cousin committed suicide.
Right.
These things are all so common.
Yes.
And I'm not sure, I think it could be a little bit of both. I'm not sure if it's the stigma that still permeates that goes around protecting family secrets.
Yeah.
Or the fact that we've just never really talked. It's been brushed so far under the rug that we've never really brought these things up and talked about.
Right.
Uncle Jim or my big sister or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think as a society, we all want to be okay and we all want to feel normal, but we've got no fucking idea
Right.
what normal is,
No.
right? Until you get, like, in your case, you get like session by session, you get to frame up take normal and frame it to health and compare and try to parallel and
Right.
move, into one screen.
Yeah.
And for us, we get a lot of collateral up front from, 360 from all the family members that we can get together.
Right.
And then we have to do that pretty quick.
Yes.
Rapidly, right? Like, we don't have a very long launch pad.
Right.
But it's so interesting to me how each family, and I'm like growing up in my own life, like I thought what I saw was normal because that was my normal.
Same. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we all tend to do that.
Right.
Then we get to adulthood and we're like, hey, wait a minute, what you talking about, man?
Hold on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It becomes whatever's regular is normal.
Right.
That's it.
I'm happy to see things changing, right, with people discussing mental health, wellness, attachment. The way that we parent has changed a great deal. People talking about things, but we still have a long way to go. And you can overdo it, right, as well.
Seen that.
Yeah. But I was also a person that, when I got to the place where I was, deploying my relief-seeking missile, I was in so much pain, but I had no idea that I was in so much pain because everything looked fine, right? I shouldn't, where is it coming from? I didn't understand it. And now I do, and that's something that I help clients understand, right? And it's not a blame game. I think that's has a lot to do with it as well. It's our family. We don't want to, in some cases, people don't want to badmouth their family and they want to take responsibility. So I have to help people understand, this is just part of the process, and it helps you get to a healthy relationship on the other side. You've got to clear that up, between you and your family.
Yeah. You brought up a buzzword just a minute ago.
Oh, yeah?
That I love. Attachment.
Yes.
I love, in our work, we talk about the difference between being attached and being attuned.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Can you shine any light on, from a clinical perspective, how do we go from attachment to attunement and proper spacing, proper relationship?
Yeah. How do we do that?
Yeah.
If I could answer that in a minute, I wouldn't need to be here because I'd be on a boat in the Mediterranean. But But it's healthy boundaries, right? I think that's what you're talking about. Like there's engulfment and enmeshment, and I guess like being overly attached, too close, right? And then there's neglect and isolation and not enough closeness. And attunement is in the middle, where I'm connected, so I can connect to you and I'm attuned to you. I can, understand your needs, feel your needs, respond to them and my own. But I'm not merging with you. There's still two separate people.
Right.
I mean, again, it depends on each person, right? Because attachment science, attachment disorders is quite the buzzword, and can be taken too far, in my opinion, right?
It's on Instagram now. It's a pop psychology buzzword now.
Right. It's gone way too far. But I think it's really helpful in the beginning, right? To understand what's my attachment style, or what is my attachment wounding, right? Because in early life, there is an attachment, right? Like babies, early 0 to 5, like you're attached, and that's how you're growing and developing in a safe way. But as you age, you separate, you become an autonomous adult person, right? And a lot of times that doesn't happen with people in addiction. Most of the time, I would say.
Is that where you see most of the attachment wounds come from?
Yes. Like, I think by definition, the way that I view attachment, it is early life, right? And you have relationship styles and everything, but early life in utero and early childhood is where a lot of that really important stuff is happening, because the brain is growing so rapidly in those first 5 years, like crazy. It's fascinating to watch in my own children. But yes, early life. And it can be super subtle. Like, that's the other thing. Like, we have traumas all the time. There's like an ACE, for example, someone's incarcerated, I think is one of the ACE questions.
Yeah.
So there's an absence there. But attachment wounding can also be like your parent was just kind of too critical,
Yeah.
Like, they're fucking annoying all the time. That's like a little beep, beep, like IV drip, instead of like a big injury. And those, I think, are hard for people to understand and come to terms with, like the effect that it can have, right?
Especially when it can occur so subtly.
It's so subtle, right? It can be so subtle. And there's no judgment, because everyone's different. So like in the twin scenario, you have a super critical parent, and one twin is fine. The other twin is really impacted by that,
right?
Because they're separate people, right?
Well, it's funny you say that too, because like I noticed a lot of that in my own life growing up. Just this real kind of criticalness, but like behind the guise of like, no, like this is what's going to make you a man, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, yeah.
Right? Military parents. But at the same time, what I've noticed is like, sometimes I could start doing that.
Of course, yeah.
And then I gotta thank God for my wife Rachel, because I tell her all the time, like, when I'm out of bounds, like, I need you to tell me. I might not know I'm out of bounds.
Right.
So probably 90% of the time I notice it, and I'm like, oh no. But the other 10% of the time I don't even notice it until Rachel's like, hey man, it's just a dish in the sink.
Right.
It's not just a dish. I'm here to affirm you. It's not just a dish in the sink. That is blatant disrespect, and it cannot be tolerated.
And that 10% though, I'm like, no, it's not. It's not a dish in the sink. It's discipline, and it's going to translate. And it's not like that's just being hypercritical. And so like there really is this kind of, I don't want to call it like a balancing act.
You calling me hypercritical?
No, me. I'm definitely. I can definitely be hypercritical, but at the same time, like there's kind of like this weird balancing act that sometimes like we're not even conscious of.
Oh no. And it's a symphony. It's, like we talk about balance a lot, like a seesaw, but shit's way more complicated than that, Yeah. And this is where the personality disorders come in.
Do tell.
Well,
I've had some unique experiences lately with some personality disorders.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear everything you have to say on them.
Yeah. So I got into personality disorder work because it showed up in the room, right? Like, I mean, you say you treat addicts and you don't treat personality disorders. Like, what? How's that? And I like the underdog. Y'all know that. I have like a really overdeveloped sense of justice. So when I was in school, and still today, I hear it a lot. Like, people just have this horrible reaction to hearing borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, histrionic. There's like a groan. There'll be a collective groan in the audience of professionals, like, oh, just they're the black sheep of the DSM. And I don't like that. I'm like, what the hell? Like, we're collectively supposed to be non-judgmental. We're, supposed to be helping people, and here everyone collectively just unconsciously turns into a shit-talking asshole about this large group of people.
I was gonna say, why is that?
But you said large group of people. I think there's again, it's mental health, and there's a stigma, and so people with those diagnoses, the symptoms go so far into behaviors that they're really off-putting.
Yes,
right?
They can be.
So someone like that who's untreated with personality disorder, right? Borderline. They tend just to get called names. I don't know why Darren's just such an asshole.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
He sent me a 4-scroll text
at
4:00 in the morning, and then followed up with 5 more.
Right.
What an asshole.
Right. Yes.
Like, because there's no vision into what's happening in that person's brain.
Yeah.
Or what made them push them along this veer.
Yeah. I think they're notoriously difficult to treat. And, why do professionals do that? Because they struggle to treat it, I think, because it's hard. But the diagnostic criteria for personality disorder is a list of traits that everyone has, right? So you just have to qualify for a certain number out of a certain number. Does that track?
Yeah.
And so it's not as separate, I think, as people think, right? There's especially in the legislature, don't get me started, right? There's healthy and mentally ill, right? Just in 2 buckets, right? It's just so cut and dry. And it's not like that. But I view personality disorders through, a lens of pain and trauma, like I do anything else, like substance abuse as well. The personality develops in that early life, right? And through adolescence and then into early adulthood. And when there's stress and shit going down during that time, parallel to that process, sometimes the personality forms in a way that's not the best, right? It's not as helpful. And then it can kind of reinforce itself, right? I know that BPD, borderline personality disorder, gets a super bad rap. And, rightfully so, because sometimes the behaviors are extreme, scary, difficult. But think about what it's like for that person. That's where I'm like, okay, that person is a great deal of pain. And they've learned these behaviors to cope. It's the same thing as addiction, in my view. This is
maladaptive coping skills.
Yes.
Right. In the same way that I start drinking, I start using.
Right.
I pick up in the other vein.
Yeah.
Personality disorder. I pick up these behaviors to keep myself safe.
This is how I get my needs met. Yeah. Right. And Marsha Linehan, who I have to name, right, because she developed dialectical behavior therapy, which is like the standard treatment for BPD, came up with a theory or a model called, biosocial theory. And it's a very simple equation. It is a biologically sensitive person, meaning this person feels their emotions for a longer period of time and to a deeper breadth than like the typical population, just naturally. So a sensitive person plus an invalidating social environment, which is something we're all around, right? Don't cry. Boys don't cry. That's a big one, right? Equals pathology, equals borderline personality disorder, equals substance abuse. Like that's the model. It's that easy, right? So you've got a sensitive person, they're having this experience in their life, and then they're chronically told, you're overreacting. No, you're misperceiving, right? And to a young person, that's terrifying. because, oh, you're telling me what I think, feel, and like how I make sense of the world is wrong.
Right.
Yeah. What the fuck am I supposed to do with that? Right? Because they're not, the other thing is like the invalidating social environment doesn't coach. They'll just say like, no, you're doing it wrong. And then they stop there. They don't say, try it like this, do it like this. What if it was like this? So you're just left with shame, right? Mm-hmm. But you're still a person, you still have needs, and you're in a great deal of pain because you're very isolated. And then you start, trying to make your way through the world.
And that's where you see the often when we come in, you see the push-pull relationships with everybody around the personality disorder.
Yes. Yeah.
You're either my hero today or I'm a victim.
Right.
Either way.
Yep. Yeah. And they have a ton of failed treatment experiences, just like addicts do. Mm-hmm. Right. Most of the time when somebody comes to me personally for a personality disorder, they've been through 7 therapists. Right. And their therapists often just like blew up, terminated, right? Mm-hmm. Like in a painful way. You can't, I think Marsha Linehan herself in her biography talked about her experience in the 70s being in the hospital and the physician team saying like, you can never be helped, like that. And they hear that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sad. So I have a heart for that. And I see it, to me, it's a mirror image of addiction. Like, so.
Yeah. The missile is very similar, probably launched near the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I know we got to get you on the way.
Okay.
So I want to loop around and ask you about Bright Horse and then how everybody can find you.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's 11:30. So if we get you out of here in the next 5-10 minutes,
yeah.
Is that good enough time to get you out of here?
I feel like I've been in a time warp.
You have been in a time warp.
Did you get used to the microphone?
Yeah, kind of.
You seem like it.
Yeah, you were lined up with the mic.
Okay. I feel like I just blacked out and I'm coming back. So you did it to me like they did. Now I'm not going to be able to get
You're
back.
like Will Ferrell in old school. Oh, what happened? I blacked out.
That's what I feel like. I just got in the zone. I'm sorry.
No, you were money.
Okay.
You were great. No, you were great.
I really did just brown out, Zach. Okay. Yep.
I keep thinking about the missile though.
I'm back.
I like the missile.
Yeah. Is it pointy?
And that's that's what it's like, a torpedo, I guess, is when I see it in my mind, it's like a torpedo.
It's not a missile, it's a torpedo?
I don't know. Are they different?
They're definitely different.
They're 100% different.
Well, what does a missile look like?
Torpedoes are only used underwater.
In the water.
Right.
But it's a missile in the water.
It's a water missile.
Right.
But a missile is fired
from a
stationary.
plane.
Well, it can be fired from a plane. It can be fired from a nautical object or from a stationary
nautical object? You mean a boat?
Stationary. I think they'd say vessel.
It's the same guy who refers to food as rations. You know what I mean? So it's like,
give me my rations.
I just think of The Dictator, that movie.
The Dictator?
You never seen that movie where they make the missile and it's rounded at the top, and the Dictator in the movie is like, it needs to be pointy and more scary.
Well,
you know
it does. Yeah, no, but now I'm going to watch that.
It's a fantastic movie.
So Lizzie, in your therapy practice, Bright Horse Counseling, how can everybody find you to seek your services?
They can put up a smoke signal. No, I'm just kidding. Our
emergency flare.
Yes, that's right. The website is talktobrighthorse.com.
Okay.
And we're in Brentwood, Tennessee, and we're on Instagram and we're on TikTok. And
you guys have a full roster of therapists to handle different.
Yes, we do. So we're a team of 6. And what connects us all together is the work that we do around trauma and then the way that we approach therapy as a whole. But then each person has different specialty areas as well. So we have EMDR and brain spotting, which are trauma treatments specific. We've got some IFS, internal family systems folks, dialectical behavior therapy, standard dialectical behavior therapy and radically open dialectical behavior therapy, which is for those folks that are real treatment resistant depression or anorexia, right? Often OCPD, that's a fun personality disorder that we didn't get to talk about.
Next time.
Right. We also do couples and relationships. And we've got some art therapy and music industry specialist because we're here in Nashville.
Got it.
So, yeah.
Well, we definitely need to do a follow-up episode for this one.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Because I need to figure out if it's a torpedo or a missile because my whole day is wrecked now.
We'll figure out torpedo or missile,
Right.
And how pointy it needs to be.
Right.
Very pointy.
Very
It
pointy
needs
and
to be
scary.
very pointy
It
and
needs
scary.
to be scary and fast.
It needs to the missiles we pick need to be equally as scary as personality disorder and addiction. So that'll be a collective assignment
That's accurate.
Yeah.
between now and our next.
But see, that's where we need to end is it's not scary, right?
That's perfect.
Addiction is not scary. Personality disorder is not scary. It's just people hurting and trying to get their needs met, and we need to help them do it a different way.
Perfect ending.
Okay.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Thank you.
Intervention has changed and treatment's got to change.